Have you ever been right in the middle of a conversation trying to explain exactly how you feel, and suddenly your mind goes blank? You know what you mean, but the only words that come out are the same tired, basic ones you always use. If that has happened to you, take comfort in knowing you are far from alone. Here is something worth understanding right away. Sounding fluent in English has almost nothing to do with stacking up complicated, showy words. It has everything to do with picking the right word for the right moment, so that your thoughts come out naturally, smoothly, and with real precision. That is the actual secret behind fluency, and it is far simpler than most people assume. Hello to all my wonderful English learners out there. I'm Nisha, and today's lesson is one I'm genuinely excited about because we're going to look at 9 words that carry real power. Learn these, and you won't just be adding entries to your vocabulary list. You'll be giving yourself the tools to speak with more confidence and come across as noticeably more fluent in everyday chats as much as in formal situations. So let's not wait any longer and dive straight into the first word. Our opening word is therapeutic. Before anything else, let's get the pronunciation right, the therapeutic. Try saying it slowly a couple of times, therapeutic. Good. Now, what does it actually mean? Something is therapeutic when it helps improve your mental, emotional, or physical well-being. Think about the small things people do to feel better when life gets overwhelming. Putting on music, picking up a paintbrush, going for a run, or just stepping outside for a quiet walk. None of these activities are complicated, yet all of them share one quality: they calm us down and lift our mood almost immediately, especially during stressful periods. That shared quality is exactly what the word therapeutic captures. Let's see it working inside real sentences, since that's where a word truly comes to life. You might say, I go for a run every day after work. I find it quite therapeutic. Or consider this one: laughter is therapeutic. It instantly lifts your mood. Would you disagree with that? Probably not. Here's a more personal example. For me, cooking and listening to great music is really therapeutic. Now it's your turn to think about it. What activity do you personally find therapeutic? Drop your answer in the comments, because I'd genuinely like to know. Let's move forward to our next expression, which is begrudgingly. I understand that this one looks a little intimidating written down, but once you hear it broken apart, it becomes much easier. The pronunciation goes like this: begrudgingly. Repeat it slowly with me: begrudgingly. That's exactly right. This word functions as an adverb, and it describes doing something unwillingly, usually because you feel you have no other option. Picture a situation where you're forced to apologize for something you didn't even do wrong. Would you want to say sorry cheerfully in that moment? Almost certainly not. Or imagine your boss asks you to finish a report while you're technically on holiday, fully aware that you're free that day. You can't really refuse, so you complete the task, but there's no enthusiasm behind it. That reluctant, forced kind of action is precisely what begrudgingly describes. Let's look at how it fits naturally into sentences. My sister begrudgingly apologized, even though she didn't think she was wrong. Notice how that single word instantly tells you she wasn't happy about it, without needing an extra explanation. Another example: I begrudgingly agreed to work overtime even though I had plans with my friends. Once again, the word does all the emotional work in the sentence. It shows compliance mixed with clear unwillingness, and it does so far more efficiently than saying I agreed. But I didn't want to, and I was annoyed about it. That's the real advantage of learning words like this one. They let you say more while using fewer words. And they let your English sound sharper and more deliberate. Think for a second about how often this feeling comes up in daily life. Maybe you've begrudgingly cleaned your room because a parent insisted. Maybe you've begrudgingly sat through a long meeting you didn't want to attend. Maybe you've begrudgingly returned a favor to someone you weren't particularly fond of. In every one of these situations, you're technically doing the right thing, but your heart isn't fully in it. And that gap between action and attitude is exactly what this word is built to express. English doesn't have many single words that pack in both compliance and resentment at once, which is exactly why begrudgingly is worth holding on to. As we move through this list, notice something about the pattern forming here. We're not chasing rare, obscure vocabulary that you'll only ever see in a dictionary. We're focusing on words that describe real, common human experiences, feeling better after an activity, doing something without wanting to, but describing them with more accuracy and less effort than a long, clumsy explanation would require. That's the entire philosophy behind sounding fluent, not more words but better chosen ones. With therapeutic and begrudgingly now firmly in your vocabulary, we're ready to move toward our third word. One that has to do with clarity of thought and clarity of speech, and that's exactly where we'll pick things up next. Part 23,456 Orchestrated Vocabulary Distribution Across Sequential Sections. Strategically orchestrated vocabulary distribution across sequential sections. Strategically, our third word, is one that's tucked right into the sentence I just used to describe our overall approach to this lesson. When something we write or say is clear, direct, and easy to follow, we can describe it as lucid. Think about the last time a teacher explained a difficult concept in a way that suddenly made everything click. That kind of explanation, one that cuts through confusion and leaves no room for doubt, is exactly what this word captures. For instance, you might say, the teacher gave a lucid explanation of the complex theory, making it easy for everyone to grasp. Notice how much work that single word does. It tells you the explanation wasn't just correct, but genuinely easy to follow. This adjective isn't limited to descriptions of speech or writing, though. You can also use it to describe a person's state of mind, particularly when they are thinking with unusual clarity or sharpness. Imagine running on very little sleep, yet somehow your thinking stays sharp and focused. You could say, I was surprisingly lucid despite having only slept for a few hours, meaning your mind stayed alert and clear even under difficult conditions. Or think of someone who consistently makes sound, sensible decisions, someone you'd describe by saying, he remains a lucid thinker. Making rational decisions with ease. Whether you're talking about an explanation, a thought process, or a person's mental state in a particular moment, lucid is the word that signals logic, clarity, and coherence. It's a small addition to your vocabulary, but it replaces a lot of clumsy phrasing like easy to understand or thinking clearly, letting you say the same thing with more precision and less effort. Now let's move to a word that touches something universally true about life. Nothing stays the same forever. Think about a beautiful rainbow that appears after rain and then fades within minutes. Think about a relaxing holiday that feels endless while you're on it, yet ends before you're ready, pulling you straight back into your usual routine. This fleeting, short-lived quality is exactly what the word transient describes. It refers to anything temporary, anything that exists or lasts only for a brief period before disappearing or changing. This word works particularly well for describing emotional states, because feelings, by their very nature, tend to come and go. You might say our mood can be transient, meaning it shifts and changes rather than staying fixed. Even physical sensations fit this pattern. Even pain can be transient, meaning it doesn't necessarily last forever, even when it feels overwhelming in the moment. Let's look at a couple more examples to solidify this. The excitement about the new project was transient. People soon lost interest. Here, the word tells you that the initial enthusiasm faded quickly, almost as fast as it appeared. Or consider, his anger is transient, so he'll calm down soon, which reassures you that the current emotional state won't last, and calm will return before long. What makes transient such a valuable word is how naturally it applies to daily life. Trends are transient, fashion is transient, popularity in many cases is transient. Even certain physical experiences like a headache or a burst of soreness after exercise can be described as transient when they're expected to pass soon. Whenever you want to communicate that something is temporary, fleeting, or short-lived, rather than reaching for a longer phrase like it won't last long or it's just for now, you now have a single, precise word ready to use. This is really the essence of sounding fluent, swapping out long, generic phrasing for one word that carries the exact meaning you intend, without losing any nuance along the way. Notice, too, how naturally these two words connect to real experiences you've likely had yourself. Maybe you've had a lucid moment of clarity during a stressful week, where suddenly everything made sense. Maybe you've also felt a transient burst of happiness after receiving good news, only to have life return to its normal rhythm shortly after. Language becomes memorable and genuinely useful when it maps onto lived experience like this, rather than existing only as abstract definitions in a textbook. That's exactly why we're building this vocabulary lesson around relatable situations instead of isolated word lists. As we move forward, we're about to encounter a word that speaks to something far more enduring than transience. Something that describes people who refuse to give up even when circumstances turn difficult. If transient is about things fading quickly, our next word is almost its opposite in spirit, describing the kind of persistence that carries someone through hardship toward eventual success. Let's carry that thought with us as we step into the next stage of this lesson. Part 3, Architected Substantial Section, Bridging Tenacity, Vitality. And forthcoming limitations, Architected Substantial Section, Bridging Tenacity, Vitality. And forthcoming limitations, that word is tenacity, and I'll admit right away that this is one of my personal favorites on this entire list. It's a noun and you pronounce it like this, tenacity. Say it slowly with me, tenacity, well done. At its core, this word means determination, persistence, and the ability to keep pushing forward no matter how many obstacles show up along the way. A person who has tenacity simply does not quit when things get hard. They might feel frustrated, tired, or discouraged, but they keep going anyway. Think back to a moment in your own life when you faced something that felt genuinely impossible. Maybe it was a difficult exam you weren't sure you'd pass, a physical challenge that pushed your body to its limit, or a personal goal that seemed to keep slipping further away every time you reached for it. And yet, despite every setback, you kept showing up and kept trying. That refusal to give up, that inner strength that keeps pulling you forward, is exactly what tenacity describes. It's a word most often used to praise people who work hard and refuse to be defeated by failure, whether they're preparing for a difficult test, training for a marathon, or chasing a long-term dream that takes years to achieve. Let's look at how it appears in real sentences. Her tenacity helped her build a successful business despite many failures. Notice how the word instantly tells you that success didn't come easily to her. It came because she refused to stop trying even after multiple setbacks. Here's another example. It was his tenacity that helped him recover from a serious injury. Again, this single word carries an entire story inside it: struggle, effort, and eventual triumph, all condensed into one term. Isn't it remarkable how much emotional and narrative weight one carefully chosen word can hold? That's the real power of expanding your vocabulary with words like this one. Now let's move to a word you've probably heard often, yet it's worth examining closely because of how frequently it comes up in serious, meaningful conversations. That word is vital. Something described as vital is extremely important, often to the point of being necessary for something else to succeed or even continue existing. It's stronger than simply saying something is important. It suggests that without this particular thing, the entire outcome could be at risk. Consider a few examples that show this clearly. Drinking water is vital for our health. This isn't just a helpful suggestion. Without adequate water, our bodies simply cannot function properly. Or think about relationships. Communication is vital in a good relationship. Without honest, consistent communication, even the strongest relationship can weaken and eventually fall apart. One more example worth noting: it is vital to prepare well before an important exam. Here, the word emphasizes that proper preparation isn't optional or merely beneficial. It's essential to achieving a good result. Whenever you want to stress that something absolutely cannot be skipped or ignored, whether in health, relationships, work, or education, vital is the word that carries that necessary weight and urgency. What's interesting about pairing tenacity and vital together is how often they show up in the same real-life stories. Think about anyone who has ever achieved something meaningful, building a business, recovering from illness, mastering a difficult skill. Their tenacity was often the driving force behind their success, but along the way, certain vital ingredients also had to be present. Vital support from family, vital information at the right time. Vital decisions made without hesitation. Success rarely comes from persistence alone. It comes from persistence combined with recognizing what truly matters most in a given moment. That's precisely why both of these words deserve a permanent place in your everyday vocabulary. They don't just sound impressive, they help you tell richer, more accurate stories about real experiences. As we continue building your vocabulary, we're about to shift toward a word that appears constantly in business dealings, legal documents, and even in casual everyday conversations. Whenever there's a hidden detail or condition that changes the full picture of an agreement. This next word teaches you how to describe those subtle catches, those fine print warnings that can completely shift how you feel about a deal, an offer, or a decision. It's a word that, once you understand it, you'll start noticing constantly in contracts, negotiations, and even simple conversations between friends. Let's carry this thread forward and step directly into that idea as we move into the next part of our lesson. Synthesized vocabulary into narrative section. Synthesized vocabulary into narrative. Section part 4. That word is caveat, pronounced caveat. Say it slowly, caveat. A caveat is a condition, limitation, or warning attached to a decision, an agreement, or a piece of information, something that affects how you should interpret or act on it. You'll hear this word constantly in business dealings, financial discussions, legal contracts, and honestly, even in casual everyday conversations. Whenever someone wants to highlight an important detail before you commit to something, especially when rules or risks are involved. Picture it as a small footnote hiding at the bottom of a contract, or the fine print buried inside a deal that sounds perfect on the surface. Everything about the offer might seem appealing at first glance, but then there's one detail, one small catch, that could completely change how you feel about the whole arrangement. Have you ever agreed to something, only to discover afterward that there was a condition attached that you hadn't fully considered? That condition is precisely what we call a caveat. Let's walk through a few examples to make this crystal clear. The company offered him a promotion, but with a caveat: he had to relocate to another city. Suddenly, an exciting opportunity comes with a significant personal cost attached to it. Here's another: he inherited the house with a caveat: he couldn't sell it for at least 10 years. The inheritance sounds generous, until you realize there's a restriction limiting what he can actually do with it. One more: the flight ticket was cheap, but with one caveat: no refunds or changes were allowed. That low price suddenly feels a lot less appealing once you understand the risk attached to it. In each case, the caveat is the detail that reshapes the entire situation, turning something that initially looked simple into something requiring careful thought. This word is especially useful because it lets you flag important conditions without sounding overly formal or legalistic. Instead of saying, "There's a condition you should know about and it might change your mind," you can simply say, "There's a caveat," and native speakers will immediately understand exactly what you mean. It's efficient, it's precise, and it instantly makes you sound more informed and articulate, whether you're discussing a job offer, a rental agreement, or even a favor a friend is doing for you. Now let's move toward our next word, one that describes something at the very beginning of its existence, something just starting to take shape. That word is nascent, pronounced nascent. Try saying it slowly, nascent. It's an adjective used to describe something that is just beginning to develop, form, or grow. This word applies beautifully to ideas, businesses, technologies, or trends that are still in their earliest stages, not yet fully developed but clearly showing signs of potential. Think of a small seed that has just cracked open and sent out its very first tiny sprout. It isn't a full plant yet, not by any means, but it has undeniably begun the process of becoming one. That early, fragile, promising stage is exactly what nascent captures. Let's see it in action. The company is still in its nascent stage but has great potential. This tells you the business is young and unproven, yet there are clear signs suggesting it could grow into something significant. Here's another example. His nascent interest in coding led him to take online courses. This shows an interest that had only just begun forming, yet was already strong enough to inspire real action. What makes nascent particularly elegant is how much more sophisticated and polished it sounds compared to simply saying something is new or just starting out. Describing a company as new tells your listener very little beyond its age. Describing it as nascent, on the other hand, suggests youth combined with genuine potential, an early stage that carries the promise of future growth. This subtle difference is exactly what separates basic vocabulary from fluent, confident expression, the same core idea, expressed with far greater precision and impact. Consider how naturally caveat and nascent might appear together in a single real conversation. Imagine discussing a nascent startup with a friend, someone still building their business from the ground up, full of promise but far from established. You might warn your friend, it sounds exciting, but there's a caveat, the market is still incredibly unpredictable. In just 2 sentences using these 2 words, you've expressed both genuine optimism about early potential and realistic caution about hidden risk, all without stumbling over lengthy explanations. This is exactly the kind of fluency we're building toward throughout this lesson, one precise word at a time. As we approach the final stretch of today's vocabulary journey, we have one more powerful word waiting for us, a verb this time, one connected to awareness, education, and understanding. It's a word you'll encounter often in discussions about social issues, campaigns, and even personal growth. Let's move directly into that final word as we continue building toward the conclusion of this lesson.